Hi, everyone. Glad that you are joining us today. We are looking forward to having a great discussion with you around an interesting topic, changing boards and changing times. While we're waiting for everyone to join, we look forward to hearing where you're actually sitting at the moment. I can say that I'm in sunny Cape Town, and for anyone that is asking, yes, it is windy today. So please let us know where you're at. And just a bit of housekeeping rules. There is a question answer towards the end of our session today. So please use that. Share on chat. Make comments, let us know where you are. And we look, as I say, we look forward to engaging with you. Also, as part of the conversation today, this is going to be a high level discussion around some of the really big challenges that we're looking at today. It really is critical now to look at board composition. And we're going to be looking at future webinars that dig deeper into many of the areas that we are going to talk about today. So feel free to post in the chat box as to what you would like to hear in the future as we go along and as we delve into topics that might very well be of interest to you. It's going to be an interesting one, and I look forward to sharing with us. So I think that we can kick off really with where we're at. And I'm going to speak to you now around the topic which we have. And this is changing boards and changing times. It really is critical now to strategically look at the people element of your board. What is the current board composition? And really, is it meeting your today, or was it meeting your yesterday? And in fact, sometimes was it meeting your 10 years ago? So this is something we need to look at. And in fact, I was having a conversation just the other day, and hi, I'm here. My name is Beverley Hancock. I'll be introducing myself shortly along with my panelists. I was just having a conversation today with a 40-plus-year-old dynamic non-executive director, executive director, and she was saying, Bev, I sit on boards where we've got men, 50, 60, 70. I come from the townships, and it really was hitting home to me that we need to look at board composition, diversity, demographics, and key ways that we need to be addressing all of the questions that come up. So I would like to, at this time, introduce myself. As I say, my name is Beverley Hancock. I'm a partner at Sirdar, and I head up Appoint. So my passion is, in fact, board appointments, very much board composition being part of that, and a key element in what we do. And I'd like to, if I can get Roger, please, and Philip, I'm actually going to ask you to come on board and join us today. All right, so that's Roger and Philip. If I may, please, to both of you, thank you for joining me today. If I can ask you, please, for a brief introduction to yourself, and in light of today's discussion, where are you coming from? And what are your first thoughts on changing boards in changing times? If I can start with you, Roger.
I think that without doubt, without using all the words that we've heard, unprecedented, crisis, all of those words that have obviously been part of what swept the world has changed. And I think one of the challenges of companies is that we've got to really look at what needs to change. Now, not everything needs to change. And I think that's the challenge, is we sometimes overemphasize everything changing. But I do believe that it's really re-looking at who we have around the table, what we can bring to the table, what we can bring to our businesses and to our momentum, but also to look and say, what are we missing? And a lot of the requirements have changed for what do we want to be as companies? What business models are we pursuing? And I think that's really what I'm seeing as part of this conversation going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. And Philip, I'd like to introduce you to Philip Lopokoiyit. Philip is, hi Philip, if you can also please take a moment or two to introduce yourself and also your thoughts around the very topic we're discussing today.
Thank you, Beverley. My name is Philip Lopokoiyit. I'm based in Nairobi. Just a little bit about myself. I trained as a chartered accountant in an audit firm in the UK.
I think we're losing Philip there.
Philip, possibly turn your camera off, and we'll just we should be able to get you verbally. Just turn your camera off. I think that's
Okay, is that better?
Much.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Yes, right. It's fair to state that I've been involved with governance one way or another for most of my working life. To date, I've held the role of a director, both executive and non-executive, for over 20 years, and I'm currently sitting as a non-executive director of a listed company in Nairobi, and also the chairman of a startup company based in Nairobi. So just going straight in terms of my thoughts, I'll just say my experience. It's easy to find that the board agenda is usually set up in line with statutory and regulatory requirements, and sometimes in the absence of a burning issue or platform, we just tick the boxes in this regard. So yes. Sometimes we just eat what's brought to the table. And on a normal basis, prioritizing more forward-looking matters rather than the rear mirror certainly prepares you for a better tomorrow rather than a satisfying yesterday. But, just looking at the topics today, times are changing. We have a dynamic environment. Board members need to be engaged in order to keep up with what's happening with the company. The board needs to change, times are changing, and recognizing this in the first instance is a key step to being a catalyst for change in a dynamic environment. So yes, boards have to change, times are changing, very much aligned with our thought process.
Thank you very much for that, Philip, absolutely. And I'm going to really look at, thank you very much. So I think let's get into the nitty gritty here. And we're interested, as I say, the chats and your questions that come through. But there's 3 areas that we want to address today. And this is sustainability. And I recall Roger saying to me at one point as well, that if you haven't addressed, and succession planning is part of sustainability, if you haven't addressed succession planning yet, in today, especially in the last sort of 12 to 15 months, then you are behind on that curve. So that is one of the key areas. We're going to then move to strategic planning. Is your existing board really set for the tomorrow? I come across boards that haven't changed for 12 years. Now, when you started off 12 years ago, it was fantastic. It doesn't mean your board is right for today. And these are the factors and the skill sets that we're going to be addressing. We're also going to look at board legitimacy. And this is becoming more and more key. What does your employees, your staff, think of when they look at your board? What does your changing, and often changing, target market now see when they see your board? So I'm really going to put these questions out to Roger and to Philip today. And if I may start then with Roger, what are your thoughts on the meaning of sustainability at board level?
So I think one of the challenges with that word is it's often got very environmental overtones. But really the point is for a board is that the board's accountability is the sustainability of the business they are directing or governing. And I think that's the first, that's the first thing to keep in mind. The concept of going concern, the concept of solvency and liquidity, I think is also wrapped up in changing, adapting business models. exactly what you've just said, Bev, is that the challenges, many of our business models were built for a world that in some ways isn't going to exist anymore. You know, I'm thinking of hospitality. I have friends and I have colleagues and clients in the hospitality space, and they've really had to dig deep in terms of, you know, thinking about what they are, you know, what they have to do and how they have to address some of the challenges they're facing. We've all been to those empty malls where, you know, people are no longer going out for fear, but actually it's much easier nowadays. And some of us, you know, and so the sustainability is not just the thing of, you know, core financial sustainability or even impact sustainability, which is the environmental, but actually we've got to think of our business model. And so the sustainability of the board members is to say, have I upskilled myself? What do I know? I think the first finger that needs to be pointed, and again, I'm not into that at all, but if I put the metaphor, the first finger that needs to be pointed is to myself. That the directors need to critically analyze their own skill sets and then their team. You know, the game has changed. And I know we use those metaphors a lot, but that's one of the things. And, you know, success into the future is going to be based on how robustly we have those conversations around the table. And I think that's an important thought on that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Philip, following on from that, what does it mean to you when we look at sustainable and the challenges around it?
Right. Roger, that, you know, I think sustainability has kind of gotten a little impacted by, in particular, the issues to do with the environment and development and everything else. But, you know, pretty much in line with our thought process, you know, I believe sustainability is the ability to meet our long-term objectives and goals without compromising our current resources. And that's looking at it from a board level. And I think as well, sustainability, in terms of defining what's sustainable and what's not sustainable, you tend to be disciplined by your stakeholders. If you're operating in a manner that's not sustainable, your stakeholders are going to discipline you, whether it's your investors, it's your shareholders, the company, you know, the external environment. So it is that you can tell a business that's sustainable by the way it runs itself and the longevity that the business has. And you know, I think one other way of comparing sustainability is just comparing what are some of the successful companies you know, that have exceeded the market. How have they been sustainable in that sort of sense? And you know, some of the patterns that you get is that you know, they tend to prioritize strategic matters, forward-looking discussions over some of the more operational and mundane matters. Not to say that they're not important, but there's a way they prioritize them such that they focus on what is likely to have a bigger impact on the business. So yes, that will be how I see the definition of sustainable. And if you're not sustainable, you get disciplined.
Mm. Absolutely, and it is critical that we do look at all areas, because often the sustainability comes in even from a risk assessment perspective and a strategic perspective, and very much a people perspective as well. Is where are we? Are we on point? Those businesses that are successful really are looking at the future. And speaking of this, I mean, this is a very good bridge to the next point that we have, and maybe you can kick us off on this, Philip, is let's look at strategic planning. You know, what are the skill sets that you believe are the future for the business, and examples potentially in terms of what you feel is key in being prepared when we talk about being prepared for the future?
Okay, so I think that there's an element we need to get to kind of wrap that up, which you mentioned about succession planning. But I'd like to take them both together, because I think that the two, and I'll switch off my camera because my voice might disappear.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So The element of succession planning is an integral part of the business, and successful businesses have got to get all these key parameters aligned. So just looking through in terms of sustainability and succession planning. And I think from a corporate governance perspective, I think we understand generally that just means, having the right composition from a corporate governance perspective allows you to collectively have the right balance of skills, experience, knowledge, and independence. So that's really from a corporate governance perspective. When we come to succession planning, I think the end product, in my view, of succession planning is just diversity, and the fact that we have greater strength through diversity, whether we're talking about diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity in terms of background, and certainly diversity in terms of gender. There's no doubt that diversity lowers the risk of groupthink, and that's a killer for innovation and strategic thinking. And this is where it all loops in together. So I think in terms of sustainability and succession planning, I think one thing to recognize is that succession planning requires careful thinking and planning to build diversity. I think that it's important for the board to have a process that delivers credible candidates to fill potential vacancies. And, just like a football match where, the team manager substitutes, at critical moments, either because of injury or because the need to rejuvenate the game. I think we need to remember that in terms of the flow of the organization, and to keep the organization energized and agile, and to maintain the strategic momentum. So I think it's important that in this period of dynamic change, that succession planning is to recognize that it's an integral part of sustainability. In terms of just what are some of the aspects of strategic planning that we need to look at, I think one, just recognizing in the context of what has happened in the recent past with COVID, a lot of what we thought were business continuity plans have been thrown out of the window, and we really have to recognize the fact that things continue to change and there's a certain level of uncertainty. But being enterprising and agile is one element, and recognizing that your business and the board has a culture adaptability, the ability to recognize that change and react to it, I think are going to be skill sets that the board needs to have, and certainly ensure that that's embedded right across the organization. So I'll keep it simple in that sort of sense, in the sense that you're always going to have good input coming in terms of the strategic initiatives. It's what you do with it that makes a difference.
Absolutely. And one has to be open to it. Roger.
I was also going to throw in the sporting metaphor, because I think it's a very powerful one in today's world. Literally the lines on the field have moved. There are compliance issues we need to deal with, but also the business model issues, as mentioned. I think there are a whole lot of, and there are ironically a whole lot of words beginning with S that are really important to take into account. We've spoken about sustainability, succession planning, strategy, but it's also really important to understand that all of those words are future-looking words. We sometimes think of them as present. We're in the present, we oversee companies, but actually the most important time period for our businesses is not what was, not even what is, but what lies ahead of us. And I think that's the metaphor of navigating through this crazy storm or journey we're on. I think two of the other things that are really, really important, and they're also kind of words with S that I think are important, is every business has to be very clear about the stage it is in. Many of our clients, as you know, Bev, are multi-generational family businesses. And the way you deal strategically with a generational transition, it's different. There are different relational dynamics. And I think that's one of the things that has to do with all of these words of sustainability and succession planning, is understanding that there are relationships both around the boardroom table, as well as in the broader company, as well as in the environment we operate in, and understanding the relational dynamic. It's no longer just about the things we have as businesses and the activities we do. It's got to be as well about the relations, the relationships. And I mean, that I'm not going to preempt it, but that speaks a little bit to the third kind of topic. But it's really thinking what lies ahead. And the other concepts that come up often in this time are risk. You mentioned it. So governing risk. And that's a future orientated concept. Risk isn't something that has happened to us. Risk is something that is anticipated. It lies ahead. And I think that's the danger, is that if we're not looking at our composition, doing evaluation, so some of the techniques and tools that are becoming really pertinent at the moment are board evaluations, nominations committees, induction programs for new directors. All of those things are intertwined. They're not separate little silos. And I think that's one of the things. And to wrap up, is that it's the strategic approach to everything. Strategy isn't just another box that directors have to deal with. It's a strategic approach to everything, because the future is far more important than the past in our businesses. That makes sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it all becomes critical, and each component makes up a whole. You know, when we speak about the ESG, you know, in so many industries, it's becoming key. You know, your investors want to understand what is your environmental, social, and governance, you know, strategies. They want to understand, what are you doing? The people that work for you now, the younger generations that are coming on board and driving change, want to know. So there is a lot of factors to take into account. It is that setting, is that skill set and understanding and experience sitting in the boardroom. And I think this really leads on to the third key factor that we wanted to address. And I'd really, really appreciate, you know, when we look at board legitimacy, first of all, we need to address it and how is it viewed. And I think, Roger, if you can kick off with giving us a meaning and a broader understanding of what that really is for us, the man in the street, for us sitting in a boardroom and going, what do we need to understand about this? And then what is your take on it, and where boards are failing in this space?
So I think this word legitimacy is an interesting one, because it also demonstrates it's come to be as a result of some of the thinking about the boardroom. And so the boardrooms were seen primarily as, you know, if you go back a while ago, about speaking with the shareholders' voice. Then there was this concept of stewardship and overseeing and taking care of, having a fiduciary duty over someone else's things, and effectively that someone else is the company. Then the thinking around governance was, well, what are the key principles of governance? Almost what undergirds governance. But the most recent thinking, and it's expressed in, there are books that are starting to be written with titles like outcomes-based governance. It's a theme in both the likes of the King Report in South Africa, King Code of Corporate Governance in South Africa, the UK reports, some of the international reports are talking about the outsider, as you said, the lay person, the man or woman in the street, looks at a company and decides for themselves whether that company is worth dealing with, either as a customer or a supplier. And that's where the concept of legitimacy actually comes from, is, are you a party that is seen as legitimate in the environment that people want to deal with on an ongoing basis? And so a good example is, you know, years ago with the smoking companies, the tobacco companies, they lost legitimacy as some of the, you know, the misinformation, I mean, those kind of challenges, the environmental, you know, challenges, the oil companies. But for each of us, we need to understand the array of issues out there. So in the last year, we haven't only had a pandemic, we've had, I mean, this time last year, Australia was burning. The environmental issue was huge, you know. This time last year, there were a whole lot of other things that were emerging in the, you know, in the discrimination, in the, you know, all of those kind of areas. And so as businesses, we need to, as boards, we need to recognize that we project a picture into the world. Our brand, our positioning is now viewed from the outside in as, well, where do you stand on certain things? Now, I think it's dangerous to simply say, well, we have to go with everything, but we need to have those discussions around what position are we taking on different things, because they are seen as more integral to our, who we are in the world. And I think that's what legitimacy means today. It's not just the legal license, but it's also called the social license to operate. And I think that's, if we're not having those conversations in the boardroom around what are our people thinking internally, what are our customers thinking, what are the influences in the brand space, that we're in, or the sector we're in, are really, really important. And a lot of that, I think, part of me kind of thinks that this pandemic has been to some extent a warm-up for the climate challenges that we've seen unfolding. And that's going to be a massive one going forward, but amongst a whole lot of other things. That makes sense of what the concept means?
Absolutely, thank you. And following on from that, Philip, if I can ask you for your take on this, and where you see boards, where they're failing or where they need to strengthen in this area.
Yeah, thank you, Bev. What comes to mind as well is what's not legitimate. And I think, I'm drawn to a comment by the corporate governance guru, Marvin King, who says that global market forces will sort out those companies that do not have sound corporate governance. And underlying that statement, I believe, is about stakeholder confidence. And the stronger the stakeholder confidence is, the stronger the legitimacy. So I'll circle back and say that, for me, legitimacy, it's about achieving the effective corporate governance along the established principles that we're all aware of, that lead to stakeholder confidence. Meshing all this together, the board is expected to, provide clear direction, understanding the strategic aspects of it, embedding, the best working practices, also having, relevant independent reviews on compliance and related matters, and and Roger mentioned earlier, board evaluation. I think that the end result of all these efforts should be a high-performing organization that should be able to outperform the market. If you're not in this category, or the organization of the board is not in this category or space, again, it's a market that's going to discipline you. And we all know what's not legitimate, but stakeholder confidence enhances or buttresses that point.
Mm-hmm. Could I chip in, Bev, if you would mind? There's an interesting question which I think speaks to this challenge of change in the legitimacy landscape, but also change in the strategic landscapes. So thanks, Shay. I think it is. Strategic planning assumes a stable-ish business environment, and I love your point on this, Philip. Hence the 3 to 5 year plans, or even the 5 to 10 year plans. Would it be more prudent to focus on a sustainability-driven approach, given the ever-shifting macros? And I think you're saying, how consistent are things anymore, both in the strategic and the legitimacy place? Any thoughts on that, Philip? Sorry, I'm asking the question.
Philip, your thoughts?
Okay, so we're just looking at. I was just reading the question. So we're looking at the question about what is strategic planning and whether we should be focusing on it. I think it goes without saying that with the sort of dynamic environment we're dealing with, the 3 and 5, a step. What's the next step? And in fact, I was just participating recently in a strategic plan process, which was actually within this time frame. And I think one of my strong inputs was that the 2021 plan is what we need to achieve, because that provides a platform for us going into next year. And it's good for us to have a look at that time horizon. But in the here and now, you have to make sure that your strategies for this year provide a great platform for you to leap onto next year. And things are going to change as you go along. So I believe the 3 to 5 year plans are necessary because the amount of they demonstrate how much resources you need to put now, and obviously somebody wants to see the payback in that sort of period. But the success of that timing horizon is dependent on you making the right decisions and based on the dynamic environment that exists now. And it's important to make sure that you achieve those plans if you're to provide a platform for the business going forward.
Absolutely.
Some thoughts I had, I mean, I think, sorry if you wouldn't mind, but I think in springboarding off that, Philip, is that I think what's possibly the mindset of boards, and this again is whether you have that skill set on the board, is to hold the 3, 5, 8, 10 year plans more as scenarios, and say if we and develop a number of different scenarios, which, as you say, we need to make decisions in the present, and at the same time look at what are the emerging scenarios as we move. And so I often say we need to hold those things, plans we tend to hang on to and cling to, whereas scenarios we tend to hold with a more open hand. And we have a couple of those, and then we can assess which ones are emerging and becoming the most pertinent. But that's a different kind of thinking.
And it does take absolutely a different kind of thinking. And I think while we're actually on the questions here, and before we sort of finish off on our last sort of questions and takeaways, I see Charles had asked, can you share how one achieves to create an impact as a chair or a director of the board? How do you leave a legacy in an organization? And that's quite a broad question. What would be your take on that? And certainly effective governance and an effective board is key in order to do that. If you want to take off, Roger, do you want to?
Yeah, and it's
share?
Good to see you, Charles. Charles is a good to see your name. I've worked with Charles in Tanzania, so it's great to, and he always asks these interesting questions. And I think so one of the things that I think is really important that speaks to this changing boards and changing times is that ultimately it's about the longevity of the business, whether one calls it sustainability, continuity planning. The longevity of the business is the most important thing. The legacy is for directors in their own personal capacity to recognize that they play a role for a portion of the history of a company. So looking back, as Bev, you said, the challenge is some people sit in their seat for so long that the company sometimes suffers, whereas actually to say, I was part of that business during its history, and it does take a level of maturity individually to know when I'm no longer the best player for the team, because it's not about me, it's actually about the team I play on, and it's not only about the team, it's about the company the team is playing for. And so really seeing that link is important. The challenge with the rotation of directors is that directors sometimes have to leave companies, not because they haven't done the best job possible, but it's simply sometimes because the company no longer needs their level of expertise or their energy or their skill set, because it needs that position to be played by someone else, or it needs a different position. So it's not a direct answer, but the legacy lies in the long-term survival of the company at the end of the day, whatever my involvement has been over the years.
Absolutely. Philip, any addition to that?
Yeah, I think what I would say is that one of the things that will really help make a legacy is just making sure that you have put the right diversity on the board. I think that that's likely to outlast one way into the future. And the diversity of thoughts, and integrating that, and you're assured that you interrogate and provide constructive feedback to management, taking into account all the diverse opinions that are there. I think having that diversity, I think, lends the organization to be more successful in terms of making the right decisions and being more sustainable in the long term. So I I would pick that as among the top on my or pretty much the top of my list in terms of just making sure that you've got the right people, and I think you will the rest you will work around based on your ability to generate resources and a few other things.
Mm. Absolutely, and it is that mindset that you want to create and understand that what diversity is, and that that's whether it's age, sex, skills, abilities, race. It's all about how do we move forward. Are we understanding where we are now and where we want to be and where the change is happening? And I think that speaks a bit to Shika. See, thank you. We're lovely to have you on and joining from Accra, the beautiful Accra. Sirdar has an office in Accra, and enjoy being there. Your question is, how do you achieve a balance between strategic planning, that 3 to 5 years, and change? Now, I think, Philip, you'd addressed quite a bit of that, where it's about that flexibility. Roger or Philip, do you have anything else to add to that at this point?
I think that just to recap, I think what I just said was that you have to make sure that your next step is built on a solid platform. And we've mentioned that it's good to have the 3-5 year plan, but don't let that cause you to lose focus in terms of what you have to do in the next couple of months and the decisions that you have to take going forward. So the ability to make those right decisions is really what moves the dial in terms of your immediate success. So in summary, 3-5 years plans, those are good to have on paper. You have to deliver what against the market, in the next 12 months, in the next 18 months, and the decisions that you make now have an immediate impact on your ability to even deliver a 5-year plan. So make sure you don't get distracted in that sort of sense in terms of prioritizing what you really need to do.
No,
And
absolutely.
maybe to reiterate that, I think you've used a there's a couple of words you've used, Philip, which I think have been really, really powerful for me, is just the word distraction. It's been so easy in the last 12 months to be distracted. We've all looked at more graphs than we could ever want to look at. We've all read stats, but really we can lose sight on the main reason we're directors, which is the life and longevity of a business, but also that concept, which I think links into a couple of the things we've spoken about, is that if you're not decisive, then decisions aren't made, the market is going to discipline a board that is either too passive or just flippant or unwise in this time. So there's this skeptical consideration I think that boards need to be addressing issues with, is considered decision making, but also the skepticism about, do we have all the skills we need in the room to do what we need, or do we need new people, do we need rotation of people, or do we need new members, but also with a view to moving forward. You'll never get to 5 years if you don't get to the next 12 months. And I think that's the bottom line. Keep moving forward in a what I once heard or saw referred to in a book as a semi-coherent strategic direction. It's not every direction, but it means let's keep moving forward. We zigzag a little bit, but if our businesses keep going forward, it's what I call the bicycle syndrome, where a bicycle is designed to move, but only when it's moving. And so too often our businesses, we've been hit by this crisis, but let's at least get the bicycle moving, because then we can start to steer it to make decisions going forward.
Absolutely. Wise words as well there. Thank you very much, Roger. And I'm going to just remind everyone that there's been some really great discussions here. If there's any areas that you would want us to build on in terms of future webinars, please make a comment in the chats. I think so from a timing perspective, if I can really ask, as we sort of finish off and as we're looking at the big holistic picture that we've addressed today, Philip, if I can start with you, over and above already what's been said, what do you think the next steps are for a board to take in the now to address the future?
I think the I'll probably say two things. One, we've kind of covered it, but the one thing I'll say is that we have to embed the role of the board as a catalyst for change through the strategic planning process that enables us to have a future fit organization in a world of exceptional change. So for us, for the board to be able to react to the external environment, it needs to remain fully engaged in that process. And in remaining engaged, it means that, you know, it needs to have the relevant input and understanding of what's happening on the external environment, as well as what's happening internally on the organization. It needs to build on the diversified input that it gets from all the board members, and you know, I believe that once, you know, the board is fully engaged and its input is fully reflected on the strategic planning process, then it will have achieved, you know, its purpose of leading from the front, in particular in this sort of times where there's crisis and there are challenges that are happening outside. The other takeaway I'll probably just re-emphasize is, again, you know, and someone had asked what was important. I'll just say, you know, we tend to take succession planning, or one tends to look at succession planning from a management perspective, but I think it's as important from a board perspective. Sometimes we don't place so much emphasis on that, but it's what sets you apart in a high performance board. If we throw all the best resources in terms of you know, strategic planning, why shouldn't we make sure that we have the right people on the boards? And I think I just want to distinguish here that it's not having individual high performing individuals sitting on the board. It's about, you know, them being complementary in nature and working together to make the right decisions for the board going forward. So, and that's where I see it fits in terms of being able to make the right decisions for the board going forward. So that will be my takeaways.
Absolutely. Absolutely correct. And Roger, what would your thoughts around this? Anything else that you feel you'd like to add as takeaways for those with us and with us today to sort of take away and go, okay, I can use this, you know, what do I need to be thinking about?
I think, I mean, everything that Philip has said, I had to almost edit my response as he went. So I would, you know, repeat that. And I think some of that is so the first thing is reiterating the role of the board in terms of governance, in terms of the word governance has a metaphor in captain of the ship. And so it's what is our destination? What does the external look like? What does the internal look like, which Philip has mentioned? I think two other key things is being willing to experiment with one's process, because often what happens is we get stuck into the same way of doing things, even the same format of agendas. We meet in the same place, we sit in the same chairs, and I do think we need different thinking. And so sometimes, having not just been in the boardroom but also worked a lot with team facilitation and thinking skills, being willing to experiment a bit with it, change around your agenda, change around where you meet. And then the last one is, I also think, being willing to go off agenda. Now, what I mean by that is there are certain topics that are deeper than we sometimes get to on a board level. Things like really digging deep into our organizational belief systems, values, organizational culture. And sometimes those conversations don't fit that neatly into a structured agenda. And I just think it's really going to be important to, following after this year of chaos and craziness, is to really try to look at are we still rooted as a business? Because if we're still rooted as a business and we are deepening our roots, then we can start reaching into the future in a lot of the ways we've spoken about today.
Thank you for that. And I think, you know, Shay's actually asked a question here, and we'll have to close off after this one. But he's saying, if I'm sitting on a new board, how can I influence the focus towards stakeholder capitalism? Because that's where the growth lies, rather than that usual traditional metrics after what you've been saying today.
Possibly, if I can jump
yeah.
in there. I mean, I do think that there is an opportunity for a new board member. That's the context I'm going to be taking to find a way, obviously in consultation, probably with the chair of the board, and to say, look, can I kind of introduce where I'm coming from, much like we did right at the beginning of this session, and if that's what you're bringing, what it sounds like you're bringing, is to say we now need to relook at everything. It is an opportunity to relook at everything, and if finance has been the primary metric, really looking at what those other metrics are, and there are lots of frameworks for doing that. But have those conversations. If we don't raise those issues and unpack them, then they're not going to happen by themselves. And I think that's what we need to realize as well.
Absolutely. People need to be asking the questions. When you're sitting in the board, you have duties and responsibilities, and you're accountable. So don't be afraid to ask the hard question, or to make the recommendations around certain things. It is the way that we're going to move forward. So thank you both.
Yeah.
To Philip, yes, you wanted to mention anything?
No, I think I was just going to say that for Shay, that and I mentioned it earlier, you know, the board tends to eat what's provided on the table. And if the traditional metrics is provided on the menu, that's what they're going to eat. And I think the only way you want to change that is you know, going back to how that's prepared, and asking and influencing positively the analysis that you like to see, such that you have the right, you know, you have the right thing on the table, and that's what you need. But people will just take what's there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And a great way to end, because it is taking away that thought process. When I'm sitting in that boardroom, what am I delivering, and what is my thought process, and what do I bring to that board and to that meeting? So I just want to take the time to thank all our participants who have joined us today. It's been wonderful to see everyone from all parts, East, West, and Southern Africa. So thank you for joining us. A special thanks to Philip Lopokoiyit from Kenya, and Roger Hitchcock from South Africa, from Sirdar as a senior partner. So thank you both very much, and look forward to continued discussions.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.